tonight and come to our public, not public hearing, to our meeting tonight. And if you have any questions, feel free to come. The only thing that we ask is that tonight we want to make sure we keep everything, as the word says, Ms. Jones, decent and in order. So we're going to make sure we do that tonight. And we thank y'all for coming and come to the podium. We ask that you come to the podium. And we're not going to put a time limit on you. We're just going to do this informally, okay? All right. Who wants to come to the podium first? Mr. Mallory?
In the revenue budget, where you have a contract with the landfill with a revenue income of approximately, thank you, of approximately $702,000. I've never seen this before. Is this something new? You're shaking your heads.
Mr. Chair, if there's any questions that you would like us to answer, because a lot of these may be philosophical and they really belong to the board, but if there is a technical question, then we're here to help fill in that. So we have an agreement with Waste Management, and in fact, the board has modified that agreement to allow them to take in more trash during certain times, and so all those things have been year after year. We have a little bit of fluctuation as to how much comes in, but that is our revenue. It is a revenue source of the county. So not only do we not pay for trash as citizens like you would in another locality, but in addition, we have a revenue source by hosting the landfill.
All right, my other question is, how can you, as our Board of Supervisors, annually go along with the following financial loss with these three units: Parks and Rec, Tourism, and the Daffodil Festival? The current proposal is in total expenditures, total million, with a revenue return of $468,000. And to add insult to injury, you want to raise real property taxes by 4 to 6 cents on 100. There is also a reassessment next year. It's as a question. Everything I've got is questions.
Well, this is the town hall, so I thought it was supposed to be more discussion. I'm sorry. I was going to say, while the board was thinking of who might want to state something, just a couple clarifications. Daffodil Festival is a break-even or for-profit activity and has a reserve account so that on the years that it rains, that they do go into the reserve. So the Daffodil Festival is not costing the county anything. And it also is bringing in a whole lot more sales tax and other kinds of taxes that, meals tax, that when these people come to town and are out and about. The same thing as with tourism. I wish I knew the figure off the top of my head. We can get it for you, Mr. Mallory, but the impact of tourism dollars and revenue in this county. And we have been doing pretty well. We would like to do much better. We feel like Gloucester is a great place to come for tourists to come and spend more money. And part of the reason that people come to Gloucester, and it's part of our theme, is to come to Gloucester for history, for beauty, for fun. And part of that is our outdoor recreation. We have people who come to Beaver Dam Park, who buy boat passes, do launches, do all kinds of things. We have people come to all of our riverfront areas. And Parks and Rec in general is pay to play, the recreation. And they not only the cost of the activity, but an administrative aspect to that too is added into the fees. Parks do not make money. They are an offsetting economic boom for the community at times, and they are absolutely a quality of life activity for many families who want their children to have a place to play, or even adults. But it's just like libraries. We don't expect libraries to pay for themselves, and parks generally in public government do not pay for themselves.
Firehouse, that came up as an item in your last meeting. My opinion, we need two. We would need one on Main Street with rescue, and we need one fire truck there. We need the main house to be down on the vacant land at the Old Page site. It's still in the center part of the county, and the heavy equipment can come out of there. The other question I have is, why can't you shut down community engagement, reassign those employees to vacant internal positions, and let the school system manage their own facilities use after hours?
Specify who you want to answer.
Huh?
Howard. Specify who you want to answer your question.
Oh, well, anybody that feels free that wants to answer it.
Yeah, that'll be nobody.
That's a very
Yeah.
possibility, just like the
Mr. Mallory,
regular board meeting.
I want to go back to your comment about, and I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate
Thanks,
your questions, and I appreciate all of you being here, because this is a good exchange of information as we go through this budget, and I thank you for all your hard work that you put into this. So, but I wanted to respond to your comment about Parks and Rec, tourism, and the Daffodil Festival. They are certainly not for-profit enterprises. But the Daffodil Festival is one of the biggest, the biggest festival that we have as a county. It promotes tourism. It results in sales tax and lodging tax by tourists who come here, spend their money, and leave, and don't stress the infrastructure that we are struggling with right now. As far as Parks and Rec, I think that's an extremely valuable program for particularly the youth of our community. And when we have young people playing in sports and being coached by good mentors, they are much less likely to engage in activities that are going to put them into juvenile court, and they are going to learn life lessons. And so I think that investing in Parks and Rec, supporting our tourism, and supporting the Daffodil Festival are all positive activities for our county.
Is there anything in the state code, though, that says that you can have a retail operation within government?
I don't know that offhand, Mr. Mallory, I'm sorry.
On the community engagement, maintain the PIO position with a clerk. Several $100,000 will be achieved in savings on that one department alone. The other one is the utility department. That's broken. Is AMI contract set to include the third party monitoring the meters? And what is the cost of the third party monitoring the AMI system?
Yes, the contract does include an annual maintenance agreement. The first year maintenance agreement is $114,000, and then it increases by 3 to 5% annually. So the monthly equipment fee that was instated on each account covers that cost.
And the fund balance. I still believe this account is funny money. If not, why can't we do this? Take the assigned and unassigned fund balances in the adopted budget in total at July 1, 2025, beginning of the new fiscal year, and place these funds into CDs or other money-making interest accounts until contracts have been let to pay the bill.
Mr. Mallory, there's specific ways that we are able to invest public funds, and I'm sure Ms. Thomas would be thrilled to chat with you about this, but we do have our funds between the local government investment pool and our local bank, and the local government investment pool has not exceeded the interest rate that our bank has paid us. So we have brought in, I believe, over $1 million in interest income in fiscal year 24, and we're on track to do the same in 25, which exceeds the amount that we may get in some of those other instruments, which may not even be available to us, but we are not allowed to invest in the same way as a personal investor with those funds. It has to be a very secured method of investment.
And is the Placer 2 contract going to be canceled? The Placer 2 contract, is that going to be canceled?
That decision hasn't been firmly made. I haven't brought any requests to the board specifically for that. We have, and it's AI Placer, we have, I believe it's $100,000 in the planning and zoning department's budget, and that is to help with comprehensive planning. And I have a quote on it, but because it's not due for renewal yet, I haven't done anything on it. It may not be the best way for us to go, or as the board had some concerns with it, it may not, they may not want us to. But if we don't use that, we'll be using some other, either a contractor or other programs to help with the comp plan.
The new tax rates being applied this fiscal year will be a windfall of revenue in the approved current budget. What will you do with the windfall on July 1 this year?
Yeah, I'll take it. Yes, there is, when you do that, there is that extra flush that comes in. Until we know what that's going to be, I don't know what we'll be able to spend any excess revenue on. And of course, we don't know what the tax rate's going to be yet either. But that would be spelled out fairly clearly when we get to the point of knowing what our adopted tax rate will be.
And the last question, and a chuckle probably from all of you. I believe we need a Doge in Gloucester County. What is your opinion on this? No comment.
Oh, I could see that becoming some sort of a reality in the near future of some sort. To the extent, I don't know yet, but I could see there being enough demand on something like that pushed onto the Board of Supervisors to see us potentially looking at that avenue or a similar avenue.
Me. That's me, done.
Okay, can you hear me okay? I can't. Okay. Thank you. I'm Kathleen Jones, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I didn't plan to speak, really. I planned to listen, but I just heard you say, we don't know what we're going to do with the windfall we got, but when we get it, we're going to figure it out. Well, that's not the way to treat a taxpayer.
That's not what I said.
It sounded like it.
No,
Did it sound like it?
That's not what I said, though. What I
Okay.
said was, we
Please.
have not adopted a budget.
Okay.
So there's no way of knowing. I mean, this board could go, we're not raising taxes. There'll be no windfall.
That's great.
If there is a windfall that it gets generated when you change a tax rate, that's when we'll have to figure out what we're going to spend that money on, because we haven't adopted a tax rate. We just have advertised rates.
So you're doing your budget first, and then you're going to figure out what you need from the taxpayer.
No. Well, that's not how it works. We have an advertised tax rate so that we
Right.
can work on our budget and how much we're going to fund for the schools. And then we have to figure out, with what Ms. Steele has proposed, what the Board of Supervisors is willing to pass on to the taxpayer. Ms. Steele's budget, I think, was proposed at a 0.43 increase. We've advertised higher because the schools are asking for additional funds. So as we work on the budget and we get it tied down to what our tax rate's going to be, whatever that number is between what it currently is and what it's advertised at, as we decide on that budget amount, then we will know, or Ms. Callaway will be able to provide with us the information of what that new tax rate will generate for us. At that point, we will know what we have to spend. And until we know that, there's no way of knowing how we can spend that money if we don't know what that amount is.
Okay, I think I understand, but it sounds very confusing. It's not the way I do my budgets, and they're not the way I learned, but thank you for explanation. But I do want to say that one of the reasons that, you know, we think we need more money is because we don't have infrastructure, and we don't have infrastructure because we're growing Gloucester at a ridiculous rate, way too fast, and actually way too crowded. And I know this audience doesn't show it, but I'd be willing to bet a year's salary that most people in Gloucester do not want you to raise taxes and want you to spend responsibly, and I think you'll agree with me that we're there. And I think I'd also bet that most people in Gloucester that I talk to don't want to see the growth like it is now. If you go out on 17, and you've heard this all before, the traffic is awful. And when they put those other housing and some of the other housings that are planned in Gloucester, it's going to be impossible. And that's not what Gloucester people move to Gloucester for. The people that live in Gloucester want. We want to maintain that rural, comfortable, lovely hometown that we have, that bring people into the Daffodil Festival and bring people here to enjoy it, because it's a wonderful place. But it's changing, and it's changing way too fast. And we don't have the infrastructure for it either. And yeah, we're going to expand 17 at some point, but in the meantime, it's going to be very miserable. And I think you're not looking at those things, and I agree, we need a Department of Gloucester efficiency, because we need to look at some of these things that I think aren't being looked at. And I know you guys are trying, and all of you are really nice people. I've met all of you, and I know some of you more than others. And I know you're trying, but listen to the citizens, because I think, even though people don't reflect it, because a lot of people I talk to are frustrated because they can't get through, and they see things happening around them in Gloucester that they don't like, but they don't know how to come. And a lot of people like that say, you know, just let me do my comfortable thing and live, but they don't like what's going on. And I think that's reflected in what you're asking for budget and the fact that you need an increase of money to spend. I personally would like to see what you really need, what's really needed, because I think, if I understand it correctly, the population of the schools is not increasing. So if you need an increase in schools, I'm wondering where that's for. Are you looking at it real carefully? And I hope you are. But as a citizen, I'd like to see you not raise taxes and spend what we have efficiently. And I would love to see a Department of Gloucester efficiency formed with regular citizens. That would be fantastic. Thank you guys for hearing me out. I appreciate it.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Carter with the Abingdon District. I'm here sui juris. And I come in the love of Jesus Christ, because I believe if people don't know the truth, you're not doing them any favors. If there's a national issue having to do with property taxes that has come before Pam Bondi in a form of an amicus. Let's see, I lost the place. I want to get the exact word. An amicus curiae, which includes a petition signed by over 100 people from all 50 of these United States. The lawsuit pertains to a property tax Ponzi scheme associated with school districts that is systemic throughout the entire nation. The situation is so dire that in the not-so-near future, the whole system will blow up, leaving municipalities and local governments completely bankrupt. The remedy is to immediately stop property taxes, which are unconstitutional. They violate the 16th Amendment, and substitute a 15% sales tax the first year to replace some of the revenue lost. School districts comprise 83% of the budget, so the fraudulent property assessments are taxed on unrealized return on investments with junk bonds issued by institutions such as J.P. Morgan and Vanguard. There is bond, wire, mail accounting fraud, and RICO is involved in this. This is implicit that when your property is assessed at a higher value, the implicit tax on that is that you are responsible for the difference if the thing crashes. And it's about to do it. There's like $25 trillion nationwide involved in this. So the fraudulent property taxes assessments are taxed on unrealized return on investment with junk bonds issued by institutions such as J.P. Morgan and Vanguard. There is a bond, wire, mail, and accounting fraud. This is implicit that when the whole thing goes defunct, the homeowners will be bankrupt. Not one taxpayer has agreed to bankrupt their property to be scanned by such a Ponzi scheme that these bonds only pay interest on the debt. The school districts are the masters of the central appraisal districts. There is no accounting of sources and uses or bond schedules. Mr. Wexler has sent FOIA requests that go unresponded to. The Texas Attorney General directed the school system to respond to the FOIA request, but the school system refused. The school districts have investment pools, but who pays into them? The superintendents, the principal? What benefits do they receive? The law requires an audit that conforms to standard audit practices. Gloucester definitely doesn't, because they have never responded to identify billions of dollars of unexplained disappeared money. Mr. Wexler also said there are retreats for appraisers to defraud cities and states. I personally know someone who studied to be an appraiser, and he said his conscience would not allow him to continue because he saw how the people were getting ripped off. The scheme involving fraudulent appraisal of the market value of homes on which property tax is assessed. The appraisal of market value of homes is arbitrary, and it has the effect of some of raising taxes 50 to 90% just in 1 year. When people are unable to pay property taxes, their homes get confiscated. Every year, there is a prepaid budget, a prepared budget in advance, which is not good accounting either. Mr. Wexler also found that in a county in Texas, this is an example of how this extrapolates, a $250,000 house would be assessed to have a second concealed mortgage based on unrealized value of assessed property increase. So a $250,000 house with an assessed property value of 50 to 90% would be liable to pay the unrealized profits should the junk bonds fail. When you multiply such arbitrary assessments, a household with an average income of $100,000 could not pay the 50 to 90% unrevealed second mortgage on the homeowners. I hope Virginia's not involved in that, but it's so widespread. And Elon Musk has been talking about doing away with property taxes. So it might be something to investigate. I'll be sending a FOIA request. Thank you.
I believe she's talking about the state of Texas and what they do. And I believe the state of Texas, Mr. Gibson might be able to correct me if I say this incorrectly. Texas school boards have taxing authority. Virginia school boards do not. So I think some of those issues are probably more Texas related than they are Virginia related, because our school boards rely on funding from counties and cities and towns.
I would agree. I would agree with that comment. They do have taxing authority in Texas under the school boards. But I wanted to circle back to Ms. Jones' comment. I think she made an excellent comment. Thank you for being here, because I believe that it's critical that we manage growth to preserve our rural, small-town way of life. And our county right now is stressed in so many areas. Our infrastructure is stressed. Our first responders are stressed. Their calls are increasing. The traffic on 17 continues to grow and grow. Our schools are stressed by the challenge of our budget. Our utility system is stressed. And all of these pressures mean that we have to be extremely careful about growth because our infrastructure can't handle much more. And so I appreciate that comment, Ms. Jones. Certainly, we want to support our business community, and if there are reasonable avenues of growth that are not going to add extensive stress on our community, certainly as a board, I think we would all entertain that, but I think we have to be very mindful of those concerns moving forward.
If I may, my wife is a Texan, and if you're in the state of Texas, it's independent school district. That means that every citizen in every city in the state of Texas pays a school tax. My mother-in-law is 78 years old, and she pays a school tax, and she has all of her life. So that is the biggest difference. They're independent school districts and with tax and authority.
One comment about growth. The board has been in favor of removing the tolls off the bridge. Once the bridge is paid off, correct me if I'm wrong, but those tolls are coming off at the end of this year. Okay? And there's nothing we can do about it because the board has stressed the emphasis on what the paying the toll means to people commuting. When those tolls come off, I think it's going to be a tough job on our part to figure out how to manage growth because we all know what happened when the toll came off last time. Growth went through the roof. I came here in '69 where there was only one stoplight that was in the courthouse. There was a blinking light on Guinea Road, and now we have basically something like 16 or 17 stoplights. So I think you're right. I mean, the county has grown a lot. We have talked about growth. It's going to be tough when you have to deal with people who have property rights to tell people what they can or cannot do. That's going to be a tough one. With someone has, some property and wants to divide it. I think those are the things that we can look at as to how we want to manage. So it's an item that has come up in our discussions. Ms. Steele has looked at the entire county and where growth could occur, but it will be difficult in places where somebody says, it's my property, let me do what I want to do. And we want to respect those property rights. And I know, I agree. And we are, all of us are very careful about that. We know exactly what's going on. We all use 17. We all know what the rescue squad and fire departments have to deal with as we see their calls increasing rapidly through time. And, we all want to do what's best. We know what the citizens want. It's going to be a really difficult job on our part to figure out how to best manage growth.
My name is Diane Jones. I'm in the Ware district. And I'm not going to be drunk and disorderly tonight. But anyway, a friend of mine asked me to bring up a situation where there was $200,000, or anyway, a large amount of money delegated to studying something. And I can't remember what she said, but she's emailed it in. So I guess when she emails it in, maybe we can comment on it when the emails are read. Are you saying there are no emails?
Mr. Chair. So there are no emailed comments tonight. There has been a comment that's been emailed in for the public hearing, but the citizen that I spoke with this morning may be the same person. She was expressing a concern about the compensation study and a comment that was made at the meeting this week. I think the cost of the compensation study was in question.
What is a study of compensation?
The compensation study is $49,000. And the board voted on that unanimously, and that is, we have not had a study of our salaries in 10 years by an outside organization, and so that's ongoing right now. The board then will decide what, if any, actions they take at that point, but it helps us to understand how to remain competitive with other localities, which we struggle with. It's particular with law enforcement and utilities and other departments. And then with a lot of the changes that happen over time when you don't have your system checked, again, from an outsider and kind of an audit on that, sometimes our positions within the county themselves are not at the right step. So this is a recommendation of where people should be and a new plan. And that information will be presented at a public meeting. It should be at the June meeting.
Okay. I'm also very concerned about the growth. You know, Route 64, almost all the way to Richmond, is only 2 lanes. Why do we need 3 lanes at Gloucester Point? It makes no sense. It appears to me like there's VDOT work being done, say on 14 on the way to Matthews, before any work where you turn to go to 198. That hasn't even been finished. Nobody's even there to work on whatever they're doing there. And yet they've started a new project. And the pavement on the road doesn't appear to be impassable or full of potholes or anything, but they've got a VDOT project up there. And I know they're not going to fix the area that they messed up near my house, but that's the way it goes. I'm also concerned about crime in this county. I've lived in my house for 38 years. For the first 35 years, I could go to sleep with the windows open, the doors open and unlocked, and not worry about a thing. In the past 2 years, I've had 3 attempted break-ins at my house. I've had to acquire security stuff that I never thought I would ever have to have. One person, while I was in the hospital, actually pushed the door open, and it was damaged the door, pushing it open so hard, and left it open about 3 inches in. My house is full of boxes from people that have died in my family and things I've brought home and haven't had time to put away yet, but I imagine they took one look at my house and said, we're not going through this mess. But I don't want any more break-ins. When I got home from the last meeting, when I went out there from the last meeting, there was a suspicious car, very suspicious, and I had to have an escort to my car because it was 9 o'clock at night. And I didn't feel safe, and it was clearly a suspicious vehicle. I got home from the meeting, and both of my security lights were on, and I went in the house and could see through the dining room window someone walk across my driveway out toward Edgehill Street. That never happens. People's dogs don't even come in the yard, and something's got to be done about the crime in this county. I don't know what, but something needs to be done about it. I think when you put housing projects from people in Hampton and move people from Hampton who are used to a lot of crime in their area, I think it's really, really wrong. I don't think you should do it ever again, and I think you should arrest and jail the people committing crimes in that project, because I know you're there, the police are there half the night, usually. So those are my main concerns. I also am 77 years old. I know I look 25, but I'm 77. I don't have much time left on this earth. I'd like to live it in peace. And I would also I'm living on Social Security. I would also like to not have to, I don't take out loans, I'm too old. But I would like to not have to worry about whether I can pay my electric bill, my water bill, and my property taxes every year. And live, you know, a normal life. I don't do anything. I don't travel. I don't do anything expensive anyway. But the electric bill was $600, and the next one was $400. And the property taxes, which used to be, I don't know, it was a lot, over $1,000 twice a year. And of course, the December one comes right before Christmas, so that knocks out anything special I might have done for my family for Christmas. So think about that. I think that when you're over 75 years old, you should not have to pay property taxes on your property. And when the house is sold after I die, then you can tax whatever you want to tax. I don't care because I'm not around. But I think you ought to think about age limit on property taxes. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Teresa Ultimus, and I reside in the Gloucester Point District. Thought there was a little loop here. I'm going to go back I want to make a statement, then I have some questions. On August 6th of 2024, I spoke to the Board of Supervisors, actually in this very setting. At that meeting, I spoke to you about documents that were presented to you at your May 2nd and May 16, 2023 board meeting. I brought those documents again today because I've got new questions on that. I used these documents to speak to, and I'll speak to them more in detail and ask questions. But I want to reiterate a few of the questions and my comments from the August 6th meeting. We all know in November of 2023, there was a referendum that was placed on the ballot for the citizens to make a decision on. It failed, with 57% of the voters in Gloucester County saying no, primarily because the citizens were told countless times, not only by members of this board, but the county administration, that during your meetings, the fire department could be funded without a tax increase. Simple research, which I have done, I had to dust off this folder and pull it out again, would show the pre-mentioned meetings that you received a report from Davenport. I've got your May 2nd, 2023, this is your document, and your June 6th, 2023 document. Let's talk to this one first. At your May 2nd, 2023 document, scenario 1A, and this is the document that I showed you and I discussed back at the August 6th meeting. It says, scenario 1A, debt affordability analysis, only local transfer for debt service at 4.5% interest rate, in which I will remind you that Mr. Cole said to you was a cushion. It could be less. In fact, I think he told you between 3.75 and 4%, but he was giving you a cushion of 4.5%. And I'm going to read your document. This scenario includes the county's FY24 local transfer for debt service of $4,365,858, which in this analysis is assumed to be funded at the same level in perpetuity. The question is, and it was made, in fact, you asked Mr. Orth and somebody else asked during a meeting, are you saying that, and I'm quoting you, this means no tax increase if we leave it at level funding for the current $19.9 million that was available? And Mr. Cole replied to you and said yes. He went through the different revenue streams. He mentioned the $1.5 million that apparently, according in the footnotes, $1 million would come from Gloucester Volunteer Fire and Rescue, And then also $2.9 million would come from the sale of all the currently owned properties by the fire department. Personally speaking, that's holding the fire department hostage. I don't think you should require them to sell their assets to get a building that we as citizens desire so readily. On the same document on page 2, notes that I took, he said that if you set aside, Mr. Cole, $4.365 million every year, you had the availability of borrowing $19.9 million. I asked you then at the August 6th meeting, why didn't you take advantage of that? You could have had the borrowing authority, and he lists out the thing, and I'm not going to prolong it with the people in here, but he talked about your surplus and your deficit at $1.11 million that you could have actually had. Then it would go up in 3 years in FY27, and that's to assume that you acquired $2.9 million in assets from the fire department sale of all of their properties. And I'm guessing the way that I was listening to his presentation, they would have to sell every single thing they had. I'm assuming their assets would include their apparatus. Okay, you say no, so that clears that question. That answers that question. But it would jump up to $1.822 million. But that's only if you acquired their assets and you sold off their property. In fiscal year 24, you ended with $599,000, just short of $600,000. Nowhere in the budget did I see that accounted for. I am told, and I don't know if it's factual, so I would ask you to respond, that this was used, and again, I said at that August 6th meeting, I'm not disparaging the county employees by no stretch of the imagination, but it was used to fund their increase in their insurance, health insurance. But with that said, I would like to jump back to, I'd like an answer to that, but I'd like to jump back to what Mr. Cole said to you in this document. If you look at the additional placeholder, and he said column E of this document was a placeholder. It's left empty. Column F, that's where it talks about funding, i.e. from the fire department and then the sale of their future stuff, their assets. He talked about in column F, your radio lease payment and how it's going to drop. And then he talked about your surplus. I questioned the Board of Supervisors then, on August 6th. This discussion was had at the May 2nd, 2023 meeting. You had $4,365,000,000 available to you without a tax increase. What have you done with that money? Curious. It just didn't evaporate. It means that whatever you had, in my opinion, you could fund at the level in 23. Now I want to move to this. Does anybody want to answer any questions on this?
Mr. Chair, I was going to say, I think there's several of you wanted to talk, and I was going to ask if maybe you all could address that, because it is a story, Miss Altimus, that has like a part and then another chapter and another chapter. And
no problem.
So, I mean, we have facts we can give, but I know there are a couple board members who grabbed the mic, so we don't want to take away from you all.
The $4.3 million number that's mentioned is our annual transfer to debt service. Mm-hmm. Currently, that's gone down, I think, around $280,000 per year as we had a little debt fall off and it was redirected. I haven't had a chance to look back at my documents from that, but it was my recollection that we could have done the firehouse in 23 or 24 without a tax increase, is my recollection. The $2.9 million would be of the sale of assets, would be the properties that they will abandon once the new firehouse is open. They at the time had agreed to transfer those to us, and that 2.9 was our rough estimate of what we thought those properties would bring at sale at market. which we would then take that money back into the loan that we have out for the construction of that firehouse. There was no apparatus. It was strictly the land on Main Street they would vacate once the new property is up and operational.
Okay. Well, and I'm going on what Mr. Cole told you at the board meeting, that in scenario 1, you had 4.3 million available to you. If you added 1 penny on the real estate, which would add up to, at that point in 2023, $580,000 is what he said. He said the analysis, that's assuming that the debt was issued in the spring of 24. There was no debt issued in the spring of 24. In fact, to my knowledge, there's not a conversation that was had in the spring of 24 to issue any debt on the fire department. In fact, he said the same would be in FY25, and in 26 there would be very few dollars to pay. And that's a quote by Mr. Cole to this board. In Case A, he's got 4.5%, Case B, 5%, Case C, 5.5%. And again, he said that that's a cushion, and he was estimating at that time, we know interest rates have gone up, but at that time it's 3.75 to 4% was his guesstimate. But again, the question was asked, and he said, you would not have to raise taxes. My point being is, it was said the other night at the meeting that, and the word was used, marketing, which I somewhat found that word astonishing, because it's not marketing. It was simple facts. In my personal opinion, and I'm speaking as Teresa, I'm not speaking for anybody else, you simply did not address the issue. You could have had that discussion. 2 weeks later, you had a discussion. I went back for the second time and watched the meeting in its entirety. I've watched it twice since Monday night. Less than 20 minutes, all you discussed about trying to meet the referendum deadline in August. At your May 16th meeting, and this is from June 6th, but at your May 16th meeting, all you discussed, and I will say, there were added the Gloucester Point Beach, the park, Woodville Park, and some other things were added. The school was added. All that stuff was added. And I think it was you, Mr. Orth, that asked, well, several of you asked to bring back Mr. Cole. But I think you made the comment in the meeting that you would like to see what it looked like if we added all the $31 or $32 million projects. You'd like to see what this analysis took. So that was a question. But what I found very interesting, again, my personal opinion, why would you not want to discuss, you had 2 opportunities back to back within 2 weeks with the analysis that you've got before you, that you had $19.9 million available without raising taxes, that you could have discussed. You could halfway be done with that fire department. If not, they could be driving their trucks in and out of it now, my opinion. But I'd like to know why you chose not to discuss with that information before you to start the project and go into FY24 with that available local, budget, local transfer debt service available to you, $4.3 million available to you with no tax increase. That could have taken care of the fire department. It wasn't. Why?
I can't speak for the rest of the board. I do know that I tried repeatedly to remove the firehouse from the referendum. And then I voted against having the referendum on the ballot simply because I didn't think the fire department needed to be part of it. And I stated that repeatedly through those meetings in May, all the way up until even the night that we voted on the referendum, which I think we had to do in July. Because we didn't have a second, we only had the 1 meeting in July. We had to do it then so we could have it done prior to the deadline, to the judge, and everything else done so it could be on the ballot prior to early voting starting in September.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chriscoe. I'd like to hear from other board members. Why wasn't the discussion had?
I think some of the discussion was had that if we would have used the money, the 19 million, we wouldn't have had other opportunities. And personally, if I had to go back again, we wouldn't have had a referendum because we had the ability that we could have done a 2-cent tax increase and been able to fund the other items that are desperately needed for the county that we weren't able to do. And as a result of the referendum failing, last year we didn't have a tax increase. We actually drew money out of the fund balance and for recurring funds. So, you know, I think we'd have been in a whole lot better shape with the 2-cent tax increase then, and we wouldn't have as large a tax increase. And haven't seen the numbers, but I don't think we would have the tax increase that is potential tax increase for this year.
I would agree with you. And I thank you for being open and honest about it because, again, if you had the 2-cent tax increase, it would have gone up millions. It would have given you far more availability. But with all due respect, Mr. Hutson, I really think that if you'd have told the people in this county, if we can build the fire department, we can address this and we can address that with 2 cents, I don't think, me personally, I'll speak for me, but I don't think I would have had an issue at all. I would have rather you told me 2 cents on my tax dollar, we'll build the fire department, and then it'll hit some other issues. So I respect that answer, and I appreciate you giving that answer.
That's where we were presenting it. I think when you're looking at that large of an investment into the county, the $30 million or 30 whatever $million it was, for all the projects, that's where, as a board, the majority of us felt that we needed to have the input of the board, of the citizens of the county, because it was going to be a 2-cent increase for a lot of different projects. That's where I was coming from. I still think that we had a number of items that the county, we would have been shovel ready, everything would have been done. A lot of the other projects, the citizens would have complained the first year about the 2 cent, but they would have seen it from the fire department, from the parks to the schools. I mean, right now we're looking at adding, doing the ACs for the schools and based off of the money that we have on the school sales tax. That's going to cost us more because we didn't do it then. We've got parks, different things in the parks. And I know a lot of citizens here tonight said they don't want parks. But I think parks are vital to the county because it gives the kids, the adults, something to do. To sit there and say it's not a moneymaker, there's a lot of things in this county that aren't moneymakers. But the county is to provide services, and sometimes the services cost more money.
Respectfully, I would say to you that it's the responsibility and the leadership of you as elected officials to make those tough decisions. Are they always popular? No, they're not. But sometimes you have to have the forethought to say, okay, this is what needs to be done. But it just appeared by listening to the lead up to the referendum discussion that it was, rolling hard and fast toward a referendum and without any further hard discussions between the meetings that I listened to over the last 2 days and the decision to go to referendum. Because there were a lot of people, I for one, and I said this in my public comments, that I felt that the board was using the fire department as the anchor to get all the other candy out of the candy store. That was my opinion. I still stand by that. I said it publicly and I'll say it again. But with respect, I just felt that this board should have made those decisions, and you could have easily defended that decision. People would have been mad, but in the long run, everybody would have gotten a little bit of something. And sometimes you can't give everybody everything they want, but you certainly can have open and honest discussions with them. Now, and there are a lot of people that felt betrayed. They really did. I, too, get those questions. Why isn't the fire department built by now? People were under the impression that you had the money and it was going to be built. And I don't think it's ever really been addressed, Mr. Hutson.
Well, that's last Tuesday night's issue. That's why I asked Ms. Calloway the week before to come up with historical records, we didn't have the cash as so many people felt that we had to build the fire department. There was not cash available. There was going to be loans that we were going to have to take out to do it. And even if we would have waited, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we still wouldn't have been able to put the first shovel in the ground until this past fall. But we couldn't have borrowed money for it. There was still a delay because of timing for loans.
If I can just insert, because there's one specific thing that happened that changed the figures that made that that's what happened. When the board considered the sale of the properties and not knowing when or how it was actually going to happen, the board decided collectively to not count that into that absolute revenue, because what would happen if it didn't sell or it took longer or whatever. So when that additional revenue or potential revenue came off the table, that put us back into the borrowing until the fall of 25, fiscal year 25, which would have been 2024 calendar year. The other thing I just wanted to mention for the public to understand, when we are given the borrowing rate, they always want to have a little bit of extra, because you don't know. I mean, you're doing something so many months in advance from when bonds may sell, but they also, as everybody who's ever borrowed money know, there's a cost to borrowing money. So when they, instead of telling us it's going to be this fee or this fee or this fee and trying to break everything up, and when they don't know what the final cost is going to be, they do that in the percentage. And they've been doing the same thing with us now, saying 5%. We sure hope we're going to get it for less, but when we get it for less, it will also already encompass all of the fees for the borrowing. But that's the main reason it pushed back, was taking out that potential revenue.
Well, my question to you then is, was there ever a discussion amongst this board, you, the staff, the fire department folks, anybody, to move forward without having them submit their assets to you?
The very first meeting that I had with the fire department was after they had a setback financially on a borrowing. And so I went and I said, I think we can turn this into a win-win situation. The board has this long list of capital items that it can't fund. We have high school renovation project going on at the same time, that it would be good to have the sports complex built at the same time and save funds. So the first time we brought in an outsider to look at potential financial assistance, that VACO, not VACORP, but anyway, it was one of the ones we did a little webinar thing with them. But we talked about this, and I asked them, I had gone through their finances, I knew what we're providing every year, and I said, do you all think that you could provide $1 million up front, and we work on this? Because the county did not have the money to borrow and to be able to make our first payments, because that's how restricted we are with our funding. And we still are in the same boat. We're still relying under the amount that they would have in cash that we don't have. And so when we talked about it, and I don't remember who said it first or whatever, but it's been said several times that the fire department says, we have no need to be a landowner of all of this land, and they were planning on selling to help pay. When they were going to finance it by themselves, they were going to sell the property. So it wasn't like it was being held for a particular reason. It was going to be helping to pay off the loan, always. So it wasn't, I don't think there was anything offensive or, anything at all about that. It was like, yeah, once we're out of here, yes. But it just couldn't be counted on from a financial model. Although everybody hoped it would bring in more than that, because those were the assessed rates too, not the,
So what I hear you say is you actually had a conversation with the fire department, but what you didn't have a conversation with them is, we can't do this right now because we don't have the money? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
In the very beginning.
In other words, I've never experienced in all the years that I've been around, and I've been here a few, that the fire department rescue squads for both Abingdon or Gloucester was ever approached about putting money in to get money back.
So the reason that I approached them, not only the fact that we didn't have the ability to help them like they needed without going in this together, is that the county provides approximately 90% of their budget. So we're providing and supporting. We are in partnership. They provide all kinds of labor and also with their fundraising to help make up the other. So we are absolutely knitted together in this. And they had been saving to put in fact, when they came to the library for the strategic planning session, they came up and said, it is our hope we're going to be able to build this building. They really wanted to do it on their own. And they would be depending upon the county for those operational dollars, which we continue to give and help to purchase equipment over the long run and things like that. So they were not able to do the loan that they wanted to do, but they also had been saving, and I knew that. And so that's why I thought, let's make it a win-win. And so it was a creative, but kind of almost desperation. We all need something. Let's come together and do this. And when I presented the idea to the board members, it was in a way that we can get these other capital projects done. Because as it was just indicated, if you put everything you're paying off is for one loan, you don't have enough cash left to be able to make another loan payment. It was to put them in the same basket.
Well, the reason I ask you that is because, again, according to this analysis, and let me flip back through this page here, it's what Davenport told you in your document is that your budgeted debt service, if you continued, was $4.365 million. That's why I'm saying, why wasn't there a discussion with the board, or did I miss a discussion that you all had? I'm not privy to it.
That is previous debt. You understand that? That's not money we have.
I understand.
Okay.
But you could have had that debt continued without raising taxes. And according to what he said to you, you had the capacity to borrow $19.9 million. My question, and I'm not privy to whatever meeting that you and the fire department people had. I don't know what decision they made, but obviously it sounds to me like y'all had conversations.
Sure.
So I don't know what the agreements were. I don't know what the agreements were individually with board members or collectively with the board member. I'm just going by what I saw, what I've read, and what I've heard.
Well, and I want the public to understand, when you hear this $4 million figure of debt, that is still debt on schools and previous. So in other words, it's like if you personally have a mortgage payment for $1,000 and you're going to go buy something else, you still have that $1,000. So you're putting that like, okay, I've got to pay the $1,000. So we had to pay the $4 million because that's what we currently owe. And then in addition, we want to borrow more money. So I just want to make sure the public doesn't think there was $4 million of cash. No, we already had a $4 million debt payment on all the previous debt.
I just read to you what this says, that what's available to you at the current debt service at the $4 million.
So
And
debt
then
service is debt payment.
Correct, because it said total revenues available in '24. If the fire department had have given you $1.5 million, it says total, in column G, total revenue was $6.2 million. Total revenues available is what it says. So if you take that out, what did you spend $4.3 million on?
Look the pages before that.
Columns
Yeah.
H and I are the payments that we are
What
currently.
page are you on? I'm sorry.
I am on that same, it's a similar, I have the July 18th, 2023 analysis, but it's a very similar page. And I believe if column G is showing you total available revenues, columns H and I show you the payments that we currently have to make. So that is where the first 4.495 and 700,000 were needing to go in 2024.
Well, but this one, and this was only if the school, I don't mean to misspeak, but only if the fire department gave you $1.5 million. And then he specifically said over, and I'm looking at page 6, in column GK, where the surplus, that you would have 1 million in FY24 as a surplus, a million.
Yes.
And then you would be, $511,000, and then 500, if you save that million, you basically would be no surplus. After the third year, you would jump up to 1.8 million. But he said to you, Mr. Cole said to you, or to this board, but that is taken in consideration the sale of the fire department's assets, and you received a minimum or at least 2.9 million in revenue. Correct?
To my recollection, that is correct. But I also remember that I think I was the one that, because it was like in year 2. And I thought that was a very aggressive time frame to sell that amount of property and be banking on us having that $2.9 million available for this in year 2 after completion, or year 2 after borrowing, not completion, but year 2 after borrowing. So while I know that that money is going, or a dollar amount close to that would become available, I wasn't certain it would be available in year 2 after the borrowing.
And if I remember correctly, the board asked us to go back because the particular document that you have was pushed to the side. It was go figure it out, get Davenport to do it again, knowing you're not going to have that money. And so again, just for the public to understand the pluses and minuses, when it says $4 million in revenue, it means we take $4 million of tax money, and that's revenue. We have tax revenue. Over here is $4 million of debt we currently have. So it's a wash. The things that were added in were the $1 million from the initial donation, contribution from the fire department, and then sales. When we went back, the situation wasn't going to work out. We talked about using, because they were already planning to sell Olivia's. So we added that in to try to help make up for the loss of the other items, because we didn't know when the others were going to sell, but they knew Olivia's could sell. So we added that for $425,000 in. So that's when you look at the next version, because that version went away. It wasn't going to work. The board said, we can't count on that. So then the next one came out with the 1.425 the first year and did not count at all the other sale of the items, the other assets. So that became, I believe, the model that we mostly worked off of, and that's the one that we said, yes, we can borrow for the fire department the fall of FY25. That would have been the first time we could have borrowed, and that would have been with just using their money to pay the payments, and then our next debt would have been paid off in 28, and we would take that money and put it in, and we had the other things feeding into that.
Well, I have two questions. First of all, I was not in attendance at, I want to say it was in September of 23, there was a town hall meeting at Peasley. I was not in attendance, but I was told, and you need to let me know if what I was told was correct or not correct, that when asked, you specifically said that we did not have to raise taxes to borrow money to build the fire department. And you said that publicly.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes, we had enough to borrow just for the fire department, but as I just said a minute ago, we have this very long list growing and continuing to grow, millions of dollars. Every year we push back the sports complex. Every year we push back other improvements that go up in price. So the board collectively, maybe not 100%, but collectively agreed this was an opportunity to go ahead and put several projects together, because again, had we borrowed just for the fire department coming up, or would have been this past fall, if we'd have borrowed for that, our debt payment would not have allowed us to have enough cash on hand to go back and borrow more. When you borrow at a greater quantity, yes, you're paying more out on payments, but there's a difference with being able to put a couple $100,000 more onto an annual payment versus you need to go out and borrow a large sum of money separately, independently, go through all the cost again of having to borrow and all those things.
Well, I get all of that, but
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, no, well, let me just say I get all of that, but I think there comes a point in a time when collectively this board needs to make a decision. If the fire department is important, it's important enough to get this project done and get this project done now. And I think that is why, in my personal opinion, why people did not support the referendum, because they were told you had the money. Obviously, you just admitted that you did say that. I get that, but not everybody's heard you say that. I wasn't in attendance at the meeting, so I could not deny or say that was right. But if I want to do something at my house, and I've got a list of projects I want to do, but I only have the borrowing availability to put a new foundation, and that's all I've got, I'm going to put my new foundation in before I move on to the next. And that's why I'm saying that if it were me, in my opinion, I think that you as collectively as a board should have made the decision. I mean, here we are almost 2 years later talking about the fire department, and it sounds like without raising taxes that they're even going to see a shovel of dirt turned over. Now, I just think, going back to what you said, Mr. Hutson, be men enough to step up and say, we need to raise taxes 2 cents because we can do this and this and this with the 2 cents. And I think if you'd have done that, I don't think you'd have the issue that you have today.
You're absolutely right, but we also looked at it from the point of view, as Ms. Steele said, if we would have put all the projects together, we could have gotten general obligation bonds and had it at a lot cheaper rate than anywhere near what we're going to pay today.
I fully comprehend that.
And I sat there, and you've said it tonight, I don't think, at least from my point of view, we weren't trying to hold the fire station hostage on getting it built. What I was trying to do was trying to figure out a way that we could get all, with the 2 cent increase, have funds and benefit the majority of the people in this county. That's what we're here for,
Exactly.
is for the good of the
job.
county.
Yeah.
And I sat there, and as I said before, if I had to do over, there wouldn't have been a referendum. We would have raised it 2 cents and called it done. But we didn't. As a board, we collectively said, let's have a referendum because it's a lot of projects, and it's going to be a 2 cent tax increase. So that's where the decision came from. That's my decision, and that's where I think, I'm not saying the majority of the board, but I think the majority of the board that was sitting here, that's where we were coming from.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Gibson.
Oh, no,
Mr. Gibson, did you have something?
Oh, well, I want to hear from everybody, and I think everybody else wants to hear from everybody.
Mr. Gibson.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's mine. Yeah, and thank you, Ms. Altimus, for your input on this and for your research and for your questions. This is an important issue. I want to say 1,000% I support the new fire station and all that the first responders are doing. And I don't mean to embarrass you, but this first responder saved my son's life. He had an anaphylactic shock. My son is deathly allergic to peanuts, and he ate a cookie that he didn't know had a nut in it, and he almost died. And without your quick thinking and quick action, he would have died. So I commend you for that, and I thank you. Yes, he deserved it.
And let me just say, I'm sorry, I did not know your son went through that health issue, but I apologize. I'm sorry to hear that, but I hope he's better.
Thank you. So I'm very supportive of the fire station. I wanted the fire station to be built as fast as possible, and that's why this referendum proposal was put before the community. But I think the community, some of the thinking that the board had, again, I can't speak for all of us, but as you may recall, there was a sales tax referendum for educational funding. And because our high school was 50 years old, it was falling apart, and there was a consensus among the community that we needed to either replace the high school or we need to do a complete renovation. And the community came together and decided by a referendum vote that they were going to support that sales tax, and it passed. And as a result of that, we have an almost completed, full renovation of the high school, which I think is a good thing. And so along the same lines, we had this opportunity for another referendum with general obligation bonds, which are very low interest rates, and so to absolutely incorporate the fire station and get that built as quickly as possible, but also to take advantage of these general obligation bonds with the low interest rates to meet additional important needs in the in the county, and as you may recall, they involve some pretty important issues. There was a renovation to Botetourt, which was really a security issue. There were doors that were open to the playground that were going to be sealed so that God forbid, a school shooter would try to access that hall. That was one of the items on the renovation. HVAC, to keep our students cool and or warm in the schools, that was going to be part of the referendum, and now that price has gone through the roof because it did not pass. There was a sports complex at the high school that was on that, again, to try to take advantage of the builders and the renovators already at the high school to save money, because delay is money. Delay is money. And so there was a sense on the board, these projects are so significant, we wanted the input of the community before we borrowed that much money, and if there was going to be a tax increase. We wanted your input. In hindsight, perhaps it would have been better if we just bitten the bullet and passed it, and all these projects, there would be some in progress. But I want to clear up one major misconception. Is one of the main reasons why this referendum failed is because there was a concerted effort of those who opposed the referendum of messaging, we have the money in the bank. And that is not true. We had less than $3 million of available funding that we could have applied to the fire station. In 2023, the fire station was $12.1 million. We had $3 million. We had a $9 million deficit. There was no money available to build that fire station. The only way to build that fire station was through borrowing money or taxing. That was it. The money was not there. And as you mentioned, I continue to get asked, why isn't the fire station built? Everyone told me we had the money. And I have to say, I'm sorry, but we don't have the money. And so when I talk about delay equals money, you may not know, but now the fire station, the cost will be $17.3 million, a $5.3 million increase in just 2 years. So it is very unfortunate. And the last point I wanted to address, Ms. Altimus, is you mentioned there were only 2 meetings where we discussed these issues. I'm sorry, but that's not accurate. We met over the course of month after month after month, a total of 8 or 9 meetings, including town halls, to discuss this. So we had extensive public input on this issue.
I'm just referring to 2 meetings that I honed in on. I didn't say you didn't meet more than that.
Yeah.
No. So if you're confused by that, that's not. I'm just talking about the presentation. So let me clear that up.
Thank you. Okay.
Dr. Orth, Ms. Altimus, in reference to the referendum in Botetourt, the storm we had, 2 weeks ago when power went out? When was it, 2, 3 weeks ago? When the storm came through and we lost power in the courthouse area. The part of Botetourt that was going to be renovated, they had no lights, emergency lighting. You got kindergartners and first graders sitting there, no way to go to the bathroom. They were sitting in the classrooms with no lights or anything else. That was part of the school that was going to be renovated that is now pushed out 5 or 6 years. So you're looking at things that we could have been already working on or starting or bidding if we would have done that. If the referendum would have passed, or if we would have sat there and voted for the 2-cent increase. But that's just a prime example of different items that we're not going to get done in this county that would benefit everybody.
Well, let me go back, if I can, to Mr. Gibson. There's 2 things. First of all, like I said, I was very specific. I was only talking about 2 meetings. I know that there were others, but I was talking about 2 meetings and 2 presentations. The other thing is that I think that you and I are talking about 2 different things. When you talk about money in the bank versus we don't have to raise taxes to borrow the money, that's 2 different things. So if we want to be specific and say, we don't have X amount of dollars to even put a down payment on or whatever, I think that that's different. People we're hearing in the public, and there are people here that can correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have to raise taxes to borrow money to build the fire department, is what I heard. Now, if I heard it wrong, somebody needs to correct me, but it was never to your point, because you made the comment the other night that we only had about $3 million. I didn't even know that until I heard you make that comment Monday night. So I would just want to clarify those 2 things. I think we're we're saying two separate things.
I can point out specific references in campaign literature where it said, "We have the money." That exact phrase, "We have the money." It was never, "We can build this without a tax increase. We can build this without borrowing money." The phrase that was repeated over and over and over, because we were asked these questions at Town Hall, and we had our chief financial officer address it and our county administrator address it. People asked, "Do we have the money?" And they said, "No, we don't have the money." But the messaging continued to be put forth, "We have the money."
Well,
That
for
was the
your
phrase.
information, I was
Yes.
not behind any of that campaign, no literature. I had no say in all of that. So just so you know.
Ms.
Mr. Orth.
Altoms, I just think he was just saying it wasn't true. We're not saying you had anything to do with it.
I actually,
He just
Mr.
said-
Chairman, I think this is a good interchange.
It is, but he was just saying that it wasn't true, not that you had anything to do with it.
Oh, I know, but I just wanted to make sure that he understood, and I had nothing to do with any literature. I didn't type
No,
anything
I
or do
wasn't
anything.
suggesting that. I was just
Okay,
trying to
thank
clear
you.
up any misconception about that issue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I guess it's my turn to talk. So, with regard to the referendum, Mr. Gibson is correct, and Mr. Hutson is correct. I think if we go back and we rethink about all that was done, you're right. We should have just bit the bullet and said, we're going to raise the taxes 2 cents. But when we do that, so few people come out and give us their comments. Go to the public hearings when we have our budget and we get, 5, 10, 15, 20 people. We wanted to know what the citizens felt because there were many, many projects that were linked to this. And you're right, Mr. Chriscoe is correct. He argued persuasively over and over that we should just do the fire department and then do a referendum the next year on all these other projects. Correct? I mean, yeah. And Mr. Bazzani was in support of that. So, yeah, if we could go back, I'm like Mr. Hutson. We should have just bit the bullet, not had the referendum, and raised the tax 2 cents. And we would be much further along. All the projects that were talked about were correct. Now, let me go back in some history so you know where I stand on this. When I came to the county in '69, a few years later, I settled in here permanently, joined the rescue squad at Abingdon, and became a very active member, started as a treasurer, and eventually became president of the organization. And I remember numerous times when I was president coming before the board, asking for funds, as you guys do now, and with the board that was back then and all subsequent boards, they've all been completely supportive of the fire and rescue squad. You were on the board, and I know you probably supported the requests that have come in. So there hasn't been a single board that has said, we're not going to support it. We know the importance of our rescue squad and fire departments. There's been historical changes in the way these things operated. As you know, the rescue squad was started as a funeral service. They used the funeral service to move people around. So, a part of my life here was given to the Abingdon Rescue Squad for years and years, and that remains a part of my life, which was very important to me. I had to leave because as kids came along, I couldn't do it all. I got involved in many of the activities of my kids to where when my daughter started high school in her freshman year, you know what the complex was like. They had nothing, absolutely nothing. Football was played at the old Page. The track was a cinder track. And when my daughter started, I asked the coach, what can I do to help? The first thing he said to me, build me a track. Well, let's say 5 years later, you see what's there. And I got heavily involved. I went to all the board members, all the school board members, asking if they would support it. The Board of Supervisors supported not only the complex, but the gym at Body Tot. Body Tot didn't have a gym.
And D-Wing at the high school.
Yeah. And well, the thing that made it happen was that, there was things going on at the high school at the same time. And it was all linked together. It was just a matter of, being at the right time, all that stuff. And I dedicated my years and years to work to get that complex built. It wouldn't have been done without the support of the Board of Supervisors. They were totally supportive of it, which included Body Tot Gym. Okay, so I'm highly integrated into what has happened in this county. We are all fully supportive of the fire and rescue squad. A big portion of our budget, if you look at what Ms. Steele presented, the main items that link a part of our budget, it's, of course, schools. There's the sheriff's department. You know, we want to fully fund them because we are concerned about what's happening. And Sheriff did give us a presentation when we had our retreat that presented a lot of statistics. And I think it might be worthwhile for him to put that report because, yes, crime has increased, but it's not as bad as some people think. Now, it might be relevant to some people that have had issues, but Sheriff Warren has told us that, you know, they feel that at present, things are not as bad as some people think. And we actually asked him to give us a presentation. He showed us data after data. So, you know, we want, and it might be worthwhile for him to make a presentation so the public sees what is going on in the county because, you know, he's obviously, you know, an important element of this, and we support it fully, and we are going to continue to do that. So, yeah, I mean, there isn't a day that I don't think about what had happened back 2 years ago and what we tried to do with the referendum. And as I said, you know, we wanted to hear what the people had to say, and it's unfortunate that it did not pass. That's water over the dam. We are where we are. And you're right, we probably should have said, screw it. Sorry, didn't mean that. And didn't mean to say that.
Mr. Chair, if I can.
Anyway, let me just finish up. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate you coming here, bringing all these things. We've got to move forward. You know, the high school athletic complex that was so wonderful when it was built has undergone, you know, a lot of effort to, you know, keep it in the right way for the students. We want it for the students. It's a showcase when people come here. It's really neat. So yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about things that we do, that we can do best for the county. It really means a lot to me because I'm not going to move from here. I like it here, and this is my home, and my next move is going to be 6 feet under, okay? And when that happens, I don't know. God knows, who knows? But, you know, this board is a very conservative board financially, but we have to also listen to what the needs of the community are. As it was said, you know, sports complexes and recreational facilities, the beach, go to the beach on weekends when the jellyfish aren't around and it's packed, okay? It's the only place where people can use the water in Gloucester County the way it does. And
Well, I
we
would
want to
agree.
really try to improve that. So, yeah, there are a lot of things that we would like to do, and maybe I'm rambling on, and I apologize for that. But, you know, being on the board has been, for me, one of the most important things I've done in this county, and I look at everything that we do as relevant to how it impacts the day-to-day life of our citizens.
Well, let me just say two things, if I may.
Sure.
First of all, I've been to budget public hearings where you've had a minimum of 45 to 55 people lined up to speak. And I mean, went on hours after midnight on one particular meeting. I remember at Old Page Middle School in the auditorium, not an empty seat in the house. The second thing is, and I say this respectfully, there are people, and I hear it daily, that the reason they don't call you is they don't, not you per se, members of the board, they don't get phone calls back. They don't think you listen to them. You don't engage with them, and that's what I hear. I was a bit surprised when I came to the meeting on Monday night and there were 4 people that were citizens. I've been to board meetings where every single department head showed up at a meeting, because if a supervisor had one question, the department head was there and was available. So I know where you're coming from, but I think that a lot of people just don't think that you pay attention to what, not you per se, the board as whole. And that's why they just don't feel that they could come and voice their opinion. For one, I've said in many years that I've lived here, I have always been a staunch supporter of the fire and rescue squads, both Abingdon and Gloucester. I'm not going to stand here and allow what my work with each organization has accomplished, but we have things in this county today that I feel comfortable in saying, without my input, I'm not sure they would have gotten it when they got it. And you know that. I mean, when you worked at VIMS, you ran the squad out of VIMS. I know that. I remember all of that. But to that point, if the board would do just what they're doing tonight more often than 1 time or 2 times a year, I think you would get more input if people really believed that you would listen to them. That's my opinion. from what I'm hearing.
Mr.
Ms.
Chair,
Alderman,
can I make a
could say
comment?
something? Could I say something first, Mr. Steele, please? Ms. Alderman, that's not right, because this board, I know we answer people back. We see the emails. We get the emails all the time. I've been fighting, I fought for 2 weeks for a rooster that was bothering the neighbors. I mean, to get it solved, but we got it solved. So, I mean, it's not, we call people back. I know I do. I call people, I talk to people with ditches that's overflowing, the rooster calls, the COVID calls, all of that stuff. We call people back. So that's not true.
Oh, I'm repeating what I've been told, Mr.
But they
Chairman.
don't-
I'm just
we never hear that.
answering to Mr. Orth. And, and I mean, I'm glad we've got people here tonight.
I mean, anybody call me, I call them back and I talk to, I don't care who it is, I answer your call.
Okay. And
I want to throw in a
I
technical
helped your
point
people down
that's
in
pretty
Guinea
important.
because of the road. Big Island Road was flooding, and I got the guys to actually pave it. And this is not in my district, but I listened.
remember we worked together to get that outfall ditch cleaned out.
Yeah.
That's all I want to say.
But the
That's
next
been
thing
100
is,
years
well, I'm
ago.
trying to get them to dig the ditches out because the water doesn't go anywhere when it comes in. So we're trying to deal with that down in Guinea right now. And again, not my district, but that's
Dr. Orth?
Oh.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Steele?
I'm sorry.
all
I
right.
just want to make sure. I feel like the board is having a lot of doubts about what could have been. And I want to remind you all and let the audience know, too, that there's a difference in the types of borrowing. And we had projects that could have qualified for the Virginia Resource Authority, the VRA loans. We had other areas. But when you do a bond referendum for a general obligation bond, the comment was made, this was the lowest rate. Without that referendum, we would not have had this deal. You could have gone piecemeal to these things, and then again, you run into the problem of how do you put them all together. By putting whatever the total was, I'm not remembering if it was 30 million or whatever, project together that was all agreed upon, then when we go to borrow and we draw down for this project or draw down for this project and this one and that one, it's all with the obligation of the general tax fund to support it. And these are, of course, tax-free bonds. It's the best deal in town. Not only did we lose that opportunity, with the referendum failing, and let me just take a half a second to say, I think this exchange is very good. I just wish there were 450 people instead of 45 here. People don't know this, and they have very busy lives. But we would have not been able to do what was going to happen with the general obligation bond, and we would not have had the rates if we'd have gone for it with regular borrowing.
Well, respectfully, I disagree. I think that this board saying what they said tonight I respect these gentlemen for standing up and saying, hindsight or looking back, I should have done. I respect that. So I disagree that they're having second thoughts because of that. They can speak for themselves, but I can fully understand and comprehend. And I have to say that it is part of their being an elected official and representing the people. They made a decision that they're looking back and saying, in hindsight, I should have done it differently. And I don't agree. I don't think it's that they don't understand I'm not saying they did wrong. I'm just saying that personally, if I were sitting there, it would have been a different discussion. But that's just me, and that's here and there. I do want to move on, not unless somebody else has something to say, but real quick question about two other things, if I can. The other night, I heard Ms. Legg give a presentation. Ms. Legg, am I saying that correct? Yes. Legg? Oh, there she is. Give a presentation about the water and the fact, I almost fell off the hard pew when you said that if by the end of the year, if something wasn't done, it'd be about $27,000 in the account or something to that effect in terms of the borrowing and the reason. Fund balance. There was a point in the time that there used to be transfers anywhere between a minimum of $800,000 to $950,000 from taxpayers into the fund, and it sounds to me like that's gone away since the debt service was paid on that several years ago. So you don't transfer that level of funds to the system anymore.
Correct. I don't know what year that stopped.
2019.
Thank you. But no, the general fund currently does not transfer money into the utilities enterprise fund.
Okay, and so, I remember that when the lines were laid, I mean, I unfortunately found out the hard way, the county put a lien on my house. I was like, what do you mean? And then the first water bill I got was over $45,000. Mr. Dame and I at that time had a stern conversation. I'll never forget that as long as I live. I told him, I'm not paying $45,000. But long story short on that, with the $27,000, are you saying, did you say, that if the increase in the rates over a 5-year period, for me, that's going to be, for what I figured, is over 50% in rate increase. It's 14% for the first year, 12% for next year. It goes down to 8?
It's
7?
14, 13, 11, 10, 8.
Okay. That would build it back up to a certain level.
Yes. So the premise behind those rate increases not only allows us to cover additional debt payments should the board choose to borrow to take care of these capital projects, but will also get us to a point where we can have at least a quarter years operating in reserves. So if something catastrophic were to happen, there would be available dollars that are not already being used to just operate the department.
And then one last question on the water issue. Please correct me if this is false information. But word on the street, word on the street, I say in Gloucester, this could be the back roads. Were we ever approached as a county by someone offering to buy the water system? Because I heard that it was between $30 and $40 million that they were offering to buy the system to take it over. Is there any factual information about that?
That's a board question. That was before me.
Well, okay, before you, okay.
We were approached.
I'm sorry?
We were approached.
Okay.
I don't know the exact number it was given. Mr. Baines can answer it, but we would have still had to have paid our debts that we currently had out of that money that we were getting.
So do you remember what you would have realized?
I do not.
So the first part of that is that most of that was confidential. So there's something called a PPEA that we had to go through.
Confidential in Gloucester County.
Yeah, well, like you said, you heard it on the street. So that just kind of tells you how confidential it was.
I heard it from more than one person.
But it was based on when we didn't put out any type of RFP, they came to us and were looking to purchase it. So there's a whole process we have to go through. The board had approved a plan, and we were moving through that plan. We had to do our own, vetting of what was going on, what their offers were, what our system was, and we had to sit down with them and go through looking at the plants and everything. We got through that part of it, and then the board had to go basically into a decision on whether we move forward or not. And at that point in time, the biggest concern I remember is it's going to cost a lot. Do we want to be able to control that cost as a board still, or do we want to give it to somebody who's just going to raise the rates out through the roof? And that's where it kind of ended. But we have a whole process. It was called, I think it's a PPEA.
And the company, again, trying to be very careful, they are a profit-making company. They're on the stock market. And I went and looked at their website, and I can't remember the exact words, but they said this was a great company to invest in if you want to make some money. And in reading that, I thought, oh my gosh, if we did sell to them, what would they do to the rates? And we would have no control over it, and then we would hear about it, but we would have nothing to do with it. At the time, we were doing a lot what we could to improve utilities by purchasing equipment with the ARPA funds that we had, and trying to do what we could, to see how we could approach this without having to sell the company. And, and then the company did buy some of the places around the state, not this state, but out of state. And I looked at the comments from the people and it was shocking. I said, oh my gosh, is this what we would hear from our customers, which we would have no control over? Now we do. We have issues in infrastructure that we are trying to deal with. There are leaks every day. There's another leak somewhere, but Gloucester's not unique in this situation. Every community that has water and sewer have a lot of problems because most of the pipes are old. And I think we have a strategy to try to change that over time. It will take some time, but Ms. Lake has presented a program that hopefully will help us along those lines. There was a report way back where we started to raise the rates for 2 years in a row. They recommended raising the rates 3% every year, and we never did. And I think had we done that, we would not be in that situation. The board said, well, we're not going to, we don't want the citizens to deal with it. But had we done that, we would not be in the situation we are in today. So yeah, hindsight again is whatever. And now we're paying the price for not listening to that report.
I remember that. Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, let me just say,
One more thing to Mr. Orth's comment there about the 3%. I think the reason we started and stopped is at that time when we did this, that's been probably almost 8, 9 years ago.
yeah,
We were paying the most, our citizens were paying more for their water than any of our surrounding citizens for their water, which is why we paused on that. We probably should have gotten back to it sooner than we did.
well, thank you for the opportunity. I know there's probably other people, but I appreciate the back and forth and the exchange and helping me to understand and giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
I'd like to get some clarity on a couple of points here. I know you deflected that was in Texas, and Texas has a different system for funding their schools. But I have heard the term bonds. Who funds the bonds? Is this J.P. Morgan? Is it, or who puts the bonds up? Not, they don't fund them, but who puts them up?
Who puts the money up?
Yeah, no, who puts the bonds up?
We hadn't got to the point of who would have put the bonds up, but what would have been nice about the general obligation bonds is that the citizens of the county could have invested in those bonds.
Yeah, they invested in it, but
I don't know who did it. We didn't get that
There's a
far.
financial institute that issues those bonds, because there has to be, it's a legal
You're
bond.
right, but we didn't get to the point where we even went there. We don't know who would have issued.
That information doesn't come until that bond is going out to be issued.
You don't have anyone like J.P. Morgan or Vanguard?
I don't know who would, it would be determined at the time of the sale of the bond.
Okay. Well, all right. Now, I want to go back to a couple of things here. And there we go. When that man was talking about confidential, I want people to understand. I want you can go to Ballotpedia and look up the Virginia Bill of Rights. They think that they're following the law because they consult an attorney that operates on statutes. We are guaranteed Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, a Republican form of government. And Teresa brought up some points. The purpose of government is two things: to protect our unalienable rights. The second one is to redress grievances. Redress means satisfaction for injury sustained. They don't, and it's not just this particular government, it's symptomatic all over. But the federal level is getting it, because when that judge issued that injunction against President Trump, he was out of his jurisdiction. Samuel Alito pointed that out, meaning he had no authority to stop any of the deportation, because we are under an invasion. That Article 4, Section 4 that guarantees a Republican form of government guarantees protection from invasion. And also, they are not to aid and comfort the enemy.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
We are invaded, and that's it. If you don't understand your rights, you won't know how to stand on them.
Ms. Carter, just a second.
Can we stick to budget, this upcoming budget?
I am. I'm going to get to that.
Would you please?
But excuse me. There are fundamental principles that government needs to abide by, and you're not. Even though you swear a solemn oath before God to support the Constitution. I'm talking about your responsibility and the people. The people are sovereign. In this republic, they are. The federal level is getting it.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Can
Now,
you please?
this is what I'm talking about. When that man's talking about confidentiality on selling water, do you know what happened in California when a private entity bought water out there? They dried up the reservoir and they couldn't put out the fires. That's serious. Here's what the Constitution says. This is your rights, that all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights. You're born with them. Nobody can take them from you. And they are unlimited as long as they don't cause harm to people or property. And when they enter into a state of society, they cannot, by any compact, that's a contract, deprive or divest their posterity, namely the enjoyment of life and liberty, and with the means of acquiring and possessing property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. Now, the 16th Amendment.
Ms. Carter, Ms. Carter, is there a question about the budget?
I'm getting to it.
Would you please?
Because I'm getting to
There's people here that are waiting.
I'm
Would
getting
you
to the point of how you're going to fund it.
having
And I don't
funding?
know if you realize this or not, but the people are sovereign. You are trustees and servants. I am bringing a grievance here. And it's an overarching thing is all the details that people have been discussing about where this little bit of money is, that little bit of money, and I have a right to do this. And that's Article 12, Article 1, Section 12, and I can read that, but I don't want to take time to do it. Right now, I'm talking about this. Article 16 of the Constitution, of the federal Constitution, does not allow taxing property. Property taxes are unlawful. And this is what happened. Someone at some level picks a number out of the air to raise the taxes. Diane just mentioned she had a 50% increase in taxes from one year to the next. Now think about that. You know how much your property taxes have gone up. When are you going to reach a point you can't make that payment? Okay, so when bonds are issued, your property tax is valued so that they can get that 50% increase of what you actually pay. That goes to pay interest. It does not pay principal. The principal is your unrealized profits on your thing. That's like a second mortgage. So if for some reason the system fails, you're going to be responsible for that additional $100,000 assessment on your property if that's how much it
Ms.
is
Carter,
assessed.
Ms. Carter.
And that is,
Ms. Carter.
that is an implicit thing, and that has to do with that. The answer is to get a 15% across the board tax on goods, not to
Ms.
tax
Carter.
people's property unlawfully.
Ms. Carter, thank you.
And I have a right to express my opinions too.
May I interject one sentence? I'd like to welcome the Gloucester. Okay. I would just like to answer the Middle Peninsula young Republicans. A few of them have shown up. They're learning about all this stuff. You're going to be hearing from them.
Great, we'd love to hear from you.
Members of the board, I'm Susan Austin. Oops, better not touch that, from New York. I wanted to add a couple of comments about that discussion on the fire department. I feel very strongly about this, that we should have had a fire department started by now. I think that we were misled, intentionally or not, by the board about this referendum, because I recall that we had a referendum because Ms. Steele wanted to relocate the fire department to a different location, and she wanted to see what support there was. And there wasn't any support for the referendum, so they started talking about another referendum. And I remember these things because it really pissed me off at the time. And one of the reasons I understand that the fire department could not get funding was because they tore down that historic warehouse building and couldn't then qualify for the county's low rates. Be that as it may, we're still without a fire department. I was wondering if anybody had any plans to fund a new fire department anytime soon. I mean, we keep talking about all of these projects that we need. What's most important? When I pay my bills, I choose what is the most important thing. I can't afford to buy everything I want. We need to make these decisions, and we rely on you to do this, not to fund a little bit of everything, but do it one thing at a time. If we had done that, we would have had a fire department. You know, I'm sure the school sports arena would be really nice to have, but I think a fire department needs priority. And let's see if there's anything else. Nope, that'll do it. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Logan Avery, and I am from Petsworth. There's a few things I want to talk about. I hear a lot from my younger friends, rumors about there being some sort of devices that are tracking phones in certain districts of the county. Is that true? Is that not true? I just want to make sure and double check on that. Other than that,
What's your question?
If there were devices that were tracking phones in certain parts of the county, I heard there were a couple of rumors about that. I didn't think they were true, that's why I wanted to come up here and
I think what
address
you're
it.
responding to is what was mentioned earlier about Placer, where they were gathering
I thought it was something
information.
different, my bad, sir.
Okay.
The other thing I had to ask about was, what are we doing in terms of reinvesting into the county other than borrowing constantly? What are we doing for our own economy? What are the incentives economically for people to come here and start businesses? What are we trying to do for that?
We have an economic development authority of business people that meet regularly, and we have business incentive loans to try to encourage people to come here. We have Main Street, which offers grants to improve things on Main Street. The individual that's in charge of the EDA or county staff goes to shows and tries to support the county in any way, shape, or form. The businesses, they look at the county, they come and they ask questions. A lot of it is based on, so for example, for a business to come in here, they want to know where the people are, where they come from, what kind of communities will draw to this business. If you look at Fox Mill Run, which we didn't have years ago, that was built, and I know that the gentleman that owns that looks very carefully at a type of business that would come in there that would be successful. Chick-fil-A was a good example of an individual that wanted to do that, and it turned out to be one of the most successful Chick-fil-A businesses. We do everything we can to encourage businesses. We bend over backwards to try to attract businesses, but it's a numbers game. We have one board member that asks, can we get Costco here? But Costco looks at rooftops and how many people would be attracted that. The problem, of course, with big box stores is they take away from the mom and pop stores. And a lot of the mom and pop stores that were here years ago are no longer here. I guarantee you, when I first got on the board, the first thing I asked was, what can we do to make the county business friendly? And we went through a series of changing zoning regulations and different types of laws or ordinances that would make it easier for businesses to come here. So the board has always stressed, what can we do to attract and help businesses? And the board has done its best to get businesses here. It's unfortunate, we are a bedroom community, and so a lot of people leave the county, can't support the businesses during the day, but just on weekends. But we do draw people from Matthews, Middlesex, and New Kent. They help our economy quite a bit. And things are improving, but again, the business is not going to come here unless they know it's going to be successful. And one of the things that is important in business is for people to support it. Not go across the river and buy things over there, but to stay in the county and spend your tax money or spend your money here. And that's something that we keep on harping on, support your local businesses.
Another follow-up question I had with that, and it may or may not be a little unrelated, sorry about that. Are we consulting independent experts when it comes to things, like I know y'all are when it comes to the mega projects, but when it comes down to the things like a slope lawnmower or different AI programmings or different programs that we are currently using online, are there better ways to streamline that process when it comes to looking at purchases? I've talked to a few different engineers, a few different mechanics, and they said that it would have been cheaper to go to a local, I forget what type of chop shop they call it, but it's where they replace the engine, replace the drivetrain, and it would be cheaper in the long run than going through and buying these new machines that have planned obsolescence inside of them.
What kind of machines?
Lawnmowers, vehicles when it comes to transportation, anything maintenance with an engine. There are, the only one I can think of at the moment is a little lawnmower, but again, I don't come up here too often. I am a little nervous.
There's no need to be nervous. You're doing a good job. And I appreciate you coming, but I can't answer that question because I don't have a good grasp of what you're
Do you
asking.
know,
I think
is there any team of people that are looking at the smaller side purchases of things?
smaller side
Smaller side purchases of things.
You're asking like, what does the county?
Yeah,
with
what are we
coun-
doing as a county to look at the small purchase that might be minimized, that could be minimized?
Yeah.
Sorry about my wording.
So we have a purchasing department, and we follow state procurement laws, but we also have a local procurement ordinance that we follow too. So being a part of a local government, we benefit from other local governments, and we all network together. So sometimes we find out about if we want to go out and purchase something, we see if somebody else has already purchased it, what they've done, found out the deals, things like that. But it's in our own best interest with the budgets that we have to get the best deal that we can and also follow the law that we have. So we can't just go to somebody who's a friend and buy from them. We do have to follow those laws. But go ahead, sorry.
Well, I
Yeah,
was
just, we all,
Yes.
we
Well,
all
and
take,
what you mean. Oh, go ahead, Dr.
I'm just saying that, we have a set of ethics that we have to follow. And every year, the state requires individuals like us to take specific, they're not a course, but they tell us what we can or cannot do. And so we have to be very careful that there's no nepotism, that just because we have a buddy that does this, we just can't do that. That would be against the law.
I
And
was
as
just thinking that there were cheaper options available. I'm not saying that
I can tell you this, from the time I've been on the board, the purchasing people that we have here do a very good job on trying to get the best deal for the best buck. And sometimes it is unfortunate if we get a competitive bid that comes higher than a local. It's tough. We have to follow certain rules. We would like to very much support local businesses and everything we do. But as Ms. Steele said, we have to follow procurement laws that the state has.
Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Avery, can you wait a second?
Sure.
What were your three questions again? Just the topics.
One was about the AI thing that may or may not be in the phones. The other one was, what are we doing to bring businesses into the county?
Okay,
And the
let me
other-
ask you a question, because with the four of y'all here, it brings the average age, I hate to say this, but maybe about a year younger because of the age of everybody here. What would you suggest? You got four of you, help us. Because there's the problem that I have, that we all have, is for the most part, it's the people that are my age and older that are the ones making the suggestions. And you're the ones that are coming to the county, staying in the county, moving back to the county or whatever else, but we're trying to keep you in the county. So what would you suggest?
Right now,
And I'm putting you on the spot.
The biggest things I'm seeing for people leaving are, there's nothing to do here. Plain and simple.
What do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Costs money.
What do you want to do?
What do I want to do about that simple thing?
No.
It's-
What do you want to do? There's nothing to do. What would you like to do?
What do I want to do? Every single person has a different response, unfortunately,
Okay.
sir. I've been trying to write that down and try to make a science of it myself, and I understand your job is extremely hard with everyone wanting to pull you a different direction. And I also...
We like, as Mr. Hudson said, help us.
Hush.
We're.
Go on. Mr. Avery, keep going.
Dr. Orth?
What was the first part of that question? I'm sorry.
It was your question. What do you want? What do you think?
What do I want? I like Beaver Dam, and I don't want to speak for
No,
any of
wait a
them
second. But
specifically.
okay, go ahead. Keep going.
I don't want to speak for any of them specifically, but I know all of us do enjoy the parks that are outside, but there aren't any local businesses that are promoting some sort of entertainment thing. We lost the movie theater, and there is a horrible joke that goes around, or used to go around at the high school. Only thing left to do now is drugs and get arrested now that the bowling alley and the movie theater are gone.
It was back years ago too, but even when we had
and
them.
there's no smaller businesses for us to shop at. Or not no, there's more of a limiting selection going by as years past when it comes to local businesses doing niche things that people would enjoy. But overall, the biggest issue I see is the lack of confidence from the young people. They're just not engaging.
But why is there lack of confidence?
I'm trying to ask myself that.
No, I mean,
they don't have it, and some
but
other people
see,
won't show up.
here's my question when I sit on the board that I have, or my problem. You've got 4 individuals that I'm hoping would be in agreement that you like Beaver Dam, you like the parks, you like the activities. The second question, the second statement or question Mr. Mallory mentioned, we need to get rid of Parks and Recs, and Daffodil Festival because it doesn't generate money for the county.
The biggest reason with the Daffodil Festival, people not going anymore, is because there's a lack of activities. It's just, hey,
But that's not my point.
That's just the young people's perspective on it.
But it's a lot of different people's perspectives. And when you look at it, Gloucester has a wide range of people, ages, and it's hard to keep everyone happy. I'm so glad you came up here and I wish I could have paid you earlier to ask that question because it was perfect. But different ages have different perspectives on their needs or wants and what the county has. And that's where it's difficult for the board to say, well, we need to do this, we need to do that, or wherever. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad all of you are here, and I wish you would come monthly or twice a month. During the summers, once a month. But
I think you guys do come.
yeah, they've been, but last couple, but they don't have to stop. And you're sitting in the back, so come up and talk. It's not hard. They're out of schools now. Hey, this is our meeting.
Thank you again for your time.
Thank
By the
you.
way, I have a neighbor that just moved back to the county and has a little kid, and he did ask me. He said, "What can I do to help the county because of my generation?" So no, I think that we want to provide activities for the kids. As a matter of fact, I look at the facilities that occur across the river. My kids, look at those things and go, "My gosh, why can't we have that here?" I agree. I mean, what do we do? I mean, it'd be great to have a small committee of young people as part of our, structure to hear what? No, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if you might indulge me. I'm not used to getting an answer when I speak at the school board or the Board of Supervisor meetings because we're not allowed to get an answer. So that's why I left after my little diatribe about the fire department. Do we have any plans to build a fire department anymore?
We're working on that right now to figure out financing, yes.
It's the number one recommended capital improvement budget or capital improvement project in the county administrator's budget. So it's absolutely there.
Okay.
I also wanted to mention, you said something about a county grant that was a federal grant. So I didn't want anybody to misunderstand about a grant from a long time ago.
I know it was federal.
And I think that you might have been taking two things and meshing them together. One was the bond referendum, and one was after the referendum failed, was do we need to do a study and look at where would the fire department best go? And so they were two different issues.
Right.
Had the referendum passed, we'd be building right now. Or hopefully they would be just done.
Well, we could rehash that over and over
Right,
again
I mean,
because I can
but
tell you what I recall, and I've heard everybody else's explanations too. But communication is very important, and exact communications is essential.
Miss Austin.
Totally agree.
And I know if you look at it from the referendum point of view, and the last I'm going to say on the referendum tonight is it's a whole lot easier to say vote no than it is to have lines of everything that's out there of what was positive for the referendum. It was easier for a few people to come up with vote no and pass that out than it was, and spread some misinformation about it, than it was to go over a complete explanation on a sheet of paper.
Okay.
So-
So we're still working on the problem then?
Yeah, no, the problem is we're trying to get the fire station built.
Yeah, and we did talk about it at our last meeting, about when things could happen, and Mr., we know that there's a site plan, right? I mean, you could tell, it's like 120 days because we have
Meeting
site
tonight.
plans.
They met tonight, so it's an ongoing project to get it done.
We do have firefighters in the room, so if I say anything wrong, they can correct me. But because the project's at a point where it is being looked at as being funded by our board, and it's a number one priority, we're working with them right now to make sure that the process that they've gone through, they've worked on this for years by themselves to try to get ready. We've met several times with the building committee to move things along, and they're meeting tonight because the point Dr. Orth is trying to say is, they've got building plans that are fairly close to being done, but the site plan, how you lay out the land, the approvals, the process is one that is ongoing here, and it's a standard process. 30 days for us to review it. Once you turn it in, then we get it back to their engineer, and they have to correct things we see that we want changed on it. Then it comes back to us for 30 days. So normally, a site plan takes about 120 days to get through our system. So we sat down with them about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and kind of explained that to them, that that's probably their critical path right now, is getting the site plan in. We were working with their surveyors. They were out there tonight trying to make sure things are done. So we're working with them. We're continuing to work with them to try to help get this thing done. But again, I'm a government employee. My job is to get the work done. We don't get to go post things in the newspaper or put things online. My job is to make sure these guys have what they need, and we're going to get it done.
Well,
And that's
I
what
hope you
my
don't
job
really
is.
mean what you just said, because we need to know what.
No, I understand, but that's why we have the board meetings where they approve those things. But
Yes, but
we,
you see, we normally don't get any answers when we ask questions.
Right.
That's why a town hall is great, because
It is.
there's give and take. And we ought to have more of this and less of the regular board meetings.
and like you
because-
said, it's been very informative. And like you said, there have been some disagreements on how we want to move forward or what we're going to do, but it hadn't stopped us from getting the work done.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Good evening, board members. J.D. Clements, Chief of Gloucester Volunteer Fire and Rescue. I want to thank the citizens for your continued support. I'd like to thank the board for everything you've done for the fire department rescue squad. But we are in an ongoing process. We had our building committee is meeting with the architectural group tonight, working on the site plan. We would like for it to go much faster, but unfortunately, it can only go so fast. We hope to get shoveled in the ground by the end of the year. It's going to be close. I think that the county may have to expedite some things to help us, and we'd really appreciate if you can do that. We understand you got to treat everybody as equal as you possibly can, but talking about the amount of time it takes for plans to go through certain processes. If you can expedite them and get it done within 15 days rather than 30, would make a tremendous difference. And that's all we're asking, is for not to break any laws, but to do what you can to make things better. But I do want to make things clear. When we build this station, it's going to be in Gloucester Volunteer Fire and Rescue Squad's name. It's going to be our building. It's going to be funded by this community. But by the same token, when the time comes for it to go to career department, all that will revert back to Gloucester County. It won't be put up for sale or go back to Gloucester County. But we're asking for it to be put in our name, where we will have complete control over it. Our board of directors will have say over what's done. We may have to come to you, continue support on the money. And as far as our annual operating budget, mentioned earlier tonight, our EMS call volume last year went up 8%, fire call volume went up 12%. Along with that, related costs go up expeditiously. And you can't expect us to maintain level funding. These things will have to go up. It's a big expense, but it's not nearly as big of an expense if it had to go to be a career fire and rescue. And we're working diligently. The pagers have gone off 3 or 4 times we've been here tonight, but I wish everybody in the county could hear it, what happens during the middle of the night after you go to bed. It never stops. You get a reprieve sometime for 2 or 3 hours, then you pay for it next several hours. But I want to, Mr. Gibson thanked us earlier for coming to his son's rescue, and I'm very grateful we had a crew available to do it. But I just want to tell you a very brief thing that happened last month. We were getting ready to have a meeting and hadn't gone upstairs yet, and the doorbell rang. And I happened to be up front in the office. So I went to the doorbell, went to the atrium. So the gentleman standing down, I opened the door and introduced myself. He said, I want to speak, if you're the chief, I'd like to speak to you. And I said, yes, sir, I'd be glad to. I invited him in, told me what his name was. That gentleman lives down off the Route 14 corridor, well beyond Ware. And twice in 4 years, this gentleman has gone in cardiac arrest. Fortunately, Gloucester Volunteer Fire and Rescue staff responded expeditiously. Fire members responded in conjunction with EMS workers. We brought that man back from clinically dead to where he's still walking around today. And he came by because he wanted to give us a donation. And he said the donation he knew didn't cover our cost, but he just wanted to let us know how much he appreciated what we had done. And having said all that, that goes back a little bit to our location on Main Street. If we'd have been out on the 17 corridor somewhere, or up north of the courthouse, it might have slowed response down to that location enough to where that save situation would have not been possible. So we're still getting questions about why we're putting it on Main Street. We're putting it on Main Street because it's the most central location of the call volume that we have. So I hope that this board will continue to support that you showed us last August on the 6th by saying you would let us build a building on our property on Main Street. And I hope you'll help encourage the public to accept that commitment. And I thank you again.
I got to add this because Mr. Gibson mentioned his son. In 1990, I woke up at 3:30 in the morning and my house was on fire. And it was a pretty serious fire. As a matter of fact, I think Mr. Chriscoe's dad was the first one. They were there, but your group was there within 10 minutes. They saved a big chunk of my house. We had to move out, but I'd never forgotten where the fire was occurring. And the gentleman who went into the roof, he came back the next day and showed me his helmet, which was melted. That's how hot the fire was up in my attic. And you guys were there within no time at all. But I remember sitting outside watching up in flames, and you guys put it out pretty quickly. But yeah, it was devastating. But you were great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you so much.
Just with that, the youth here that are bored because there's nothing to do, y'all can come join fire and
So, my name is Bill Knight. Good to see you, Bob. Been a long time. I live in the Abingdon district, and I've been off and on coming to Gloucester since I was 4 years old, 1952. My parents came across on the ferry first, then they came across when the bridge was built, the first Coleman Bridge. And I guess from there I can just tell you that didn't live here all that time, but my parents bought a place here, and we came down here in the summer from the Charlottesville area for a number of years. 1975, I ended up coming here, and I lived here for a number of years. Got to know you then, Bob, and at Bethany, and then she got offered a teaching job in the only place in the state of Virginia at the time was York County, and it's because the principal of the high school was her former principal in Harrisonburg, Virginia. So teaching jobs were hard to get back then. Also, there was a thing that I remember the whole time, and this leads into where I'm going with the points to bring before the board. One of them is that there are tough budget times, and you got to prepare for the tough, because there's always the perfect storm that comes, and it's going to come sooner or later. And some of that has to do with why I addressed the reasons for restraint when we, and I hear that from the board members, by the way, addressing you in that manner. I want to appreciate your efforts in that area. I know it's no easy task, but it goes back to where I was brought up and also where I've been in the last years of all my years of business. I was in the building and development business for 40 years, and projects well over $100 million, $750 million when I retired in the pipeline. So I know what budgets are, gentlemen, and they're not, the building business is just a very indicator of the economic times we go through. It's one of the first ones to hit the down cycle. And with that in mind, we always had to address it. So a couple of things, and I want to refer to the young man that said something a while ago when he was talking about, one of the things that he was getting at is a word that we use quite often in the building business. It's called value engineering. Value engineering is where you take what seems to be all the options you have and look at them and say, okay, how can I better do this? There are ways to do it. I worked for the state for 3 years, head of buildings and grounds at Eastern State. And I know exactly what it takes sometimes to work with state purchasing and the budgeting process. And what that means is there are ways, and I'll tell you one, the lawnmower example is so perfect, you wouldn't believe it, but it's simple, and it kind of gives you an idea of how to look at things. But you can certainly look at it at a bigger picture easily. And that is when you take a lawnmower, the state had a purchasing system where you could buy things through them, certain types of lawnmowers and so forth. The grounds part of our buildings and grounds is 600 acres, by the way, and 26 buildings over there. So we had a whole buildings and grounds and a grounds division. The lawnmowers, we were spending, the budget I was looking at, it was just crazy. The amount of money they were spending on parts. They were called Yazoo mowers. We found out that we could purchase, and the state had no problems with us doing it, we could purchase Craftsman lawnmowers from Sears, and we could throw them away at the end of the season and save money. So think about value engineering in that way. How can you, within your budget restraints and within your purchasing restraints, it's how you write your specs and how you address all these different purchasing that you have to do throughout the county. And I'm talking about from your largest budget item to the smallest. It doesn't matter, it's all the same. And so that and grant writers. Grant writers, I imagine something that, just a quick question, you have to have grant writers, is that correct? Do you use grant writers? Okay. My son's done that, by the way. He was in research, medical research, and he wrote grants. And so he helped me understand that process. And it's, especially when you're dealing with the federal government, he wanted to deal more with private enterprise than he did the private research grants than he did the federal ones, because they had so many, that thick a book, versus the private ones were like this. So anyway, different story. To get on with it, one of the first things I want to address is the elderly population in this county, and I are one. Bob and I, we share, it's up here, but it's still there. Anyway, my point there being is there are, and I don't know if it's in the state of Virginia or not, but I know Florida does it. There may even be areas in the county, different counties and municipalities in the state where they're allowed to do it and not through the state. But retirees, their rate of taxation can be adjusted. It's a senior privilege, if you will, but that part could be addressed, and that's something I ask you to consider, because there's retired people in this county that right now they're struggling.
We do have a program for relief for elderly people. There, I think we're, I don't know how many people, but I think it amounts to a couple $100,000 that are in property tax relief. So there is a system that we have in place that helps people in need.
But that's income-based.
It's income-based,
Exactly,
right.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, income asset, yeah.
Right. So
Anyway, just a question I had about that. And then the fact that right now we are in part of a perfect storm, if you will, economically. It all seems to be moving along, and it's not the worst I've seen. Go back to the 70s, if any of you can go back there with me. I can tell you, I think people today don't realize how good they have it. I remember having to get gas every other day, late 70s. And I can also remember being a young couple. I feel for the young couples today having to deal with the things they have to deal with as far as even insurances or anything that they have to deal with right now. They are being hammered by this inflation that we've just gone through. And by the way, have you ever seen inflation go backwards? In other words, when you see the prices go up, how far do they come back down? They're going to stay at a certain level. They're not going to go but so far back. It's going to go up and down, and I've seen it every economic cycle since that time. But again, we're not at the worst of times, but we certainly, I think I heard one thing I'm going to point out that I really want to respectfully agree with, is having that fund over there that we're talking about to have, I think it might have been the water system, I'm not sure, where you put some money back. Oh, I mean, you got to have that. If you don't have that cushion, they're going to be coming up to your door, knocking on your door saying, hey, we got to get this water system going, and we're going to need to dig into the fund somewhere to make it work. And I think I hear the system being at that kind of point these days. So what does this mean with all the increases? By the way, I have a couple questions about the numbers of increases too. Is it also true that we're going to see an increase in our automobile tax as well as maybe boats too? I don't know.
No, what we did is we advertised a rate that was higher for for personal property.
Personal property, yeah.
And that was just a chance to see where, if it was needed, because the 15-cent advertised rate was roughly equivalent to 1 cent on the real estate rate.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see. I guess one of the things would be is that you came at us with a higher rate, and then you come back and say, "Oh well, we didn't need all that. We'll stay down here."
Well, historically, that's the case.
I mean, I understand that. That's good. I'm just saying that's not a bad approach sometimes.
Yeah, there's one thing that I wanted to mention earlier before people left with regard to property tax relief. Several years ago, the governor recognized the importance of our veterans and passed, I guess it was a bill. I mean, you mentioned that. You can speak more to it because you've been involved in that.
Yeah, so they gave us, well, the General Assembly decided that veterans should receive tax relief, which is a great thing.
Just make sure you say 100% disabled.
Right, 100% disabled tax relief, which is, great idea. The state went just far enough to give every local jurisdiction, every city, every town, every county who has taxing authority, the ability to pass this ordinance. So, of course, all of these cities and towns have passed these ordinances. Now these disabled American or disabled veterans don't have to pay those personal property taxes, and I think
real estate
taxes, and I think it's about 1.6
this year.
$1.6 million this year in revenue that we do not have. So that's basically.
You mean now, when you say that, where do you mean that?
So they don't have to pay their tax.
No, but I mean.
County budget.
In this county.
In this county, $1.6 million. And the state didn't give us any money back when we lost that revenue. So we're losing $1.6 million annually, and it went up from last year to this year, and it'll go up again next year.
And that's revenue that we well, several years ago, we have given tax relief for elderly. We have recognized the fire and rescue squad, and we allow a property tax relief for your first car, right? So that's some relief there, because we know we've got to do something to keep the volunteers here. That coupled to the property tax relief and the veterans amounts to 2.8 cents on our tax dollar that we have to deal with.
So there's one thing that I'd like to just suggest about the, and going back to the elderly, is making sure that our elderly become informed. It's hard to get that message out there sometimes, and I just wanted to make sure, because there's a lot of these folks right now that are, and some I even heard speaking tonight, after the Dominion power rates are just off. I mean, I can tell you, I didn't turn my thermostat up. I turned it down, and it was over $300 compared to last year. It was $275, maybe, something like that. I mean, it's exponential. You guys don't have control over that, but it's sure something we need to think about when we're talking about.
Right, and with Dominion, I don't know, it's probably at least monthly we receive an email. And then you can go and find that it's advertised everywhere they're supposed to advertise. They are adjusting their riders, which is a non-bypassable charge on your power bill. Meaning the riders are for offshore wind projects. Yep. They're for solar projects. They're for everything that's not to do with generation and transmission. There's even a fuel surcharge. Yep. They advertise those and they change those monthly. And the best part is they change one rider and say this is going to result in a 14 cent per kilowatt hour reduction. Well, then the next one comes out and it's a $3.40 per kilowatt hour increase. Yeah. So we're paying for everything that they've done. I think the most recent one, they added a rider for an offshore wind lease that they purchased from another company off the coast of North Carolina where nothing has been built yet. And it's proposed to be about a $20 billion project. We're already paying for it, and nothing has happened other than they're in the design stage.
And I just want to say, and this is in the middle of all this, but I've got to say it for you guys and here, and what's happening here, and everybody around here that's hearing this is what discourse is about. Because this information doesn't get out there until it gets to us, and we can get it to others too. I mean, it's not all this information is out there, and then clarification on your part as well. So I thank you for the civil discourse that you do, but you still leave it open. And I'm seeing where a lot of places it's not open, but maybe there's some other factors there that make it harder to do that. Maybe Gloucester's that exception to the rule.
Yeah, all our meetings are open and videotaped, and people can see everything that we do. And as Ms. Altimus had said, she can go back to meetings many, many moons ago and see exactly what was said. So it's available, it's online. And you're right, some citizens still are not technologically, what's the right? Technologically. So I haven't had dinner yet. There's my dinner. My dinner's right there. But yeah, it's interesting you mentioned, because I was hearing a story on the news about coupons on phones, and somebody was complaining that what do you have to do to get that coupon? Some elderly people can't even do that because it requires so many different steps to get to the register. And we've got a lot of people out there that are just like the poverty level in this county. There are kids in high school that get free lunches, but they have no meal. They go home with a meal for the weekend. So the poverty level in this county is serious.
Yeah, we service them to Achilles from our church over there, Union Baptist. So it's a great program too. They said that some of those kids would go home wouldn't have anything for the weekend.
Yeah, that's what's hidden in this county, and it's everywhere. I mean, I think it's a hidden fact of life that there are a lot of people out there that are really hurting, and these meals that these kids get, it's like might be the only meal of the day. they have. And then they go home with nothing.
I got one question that I'd like to wrap up with, and it has to do with something that all of us, and that includes elderly and everybody, is that we are I think we're in an off year for the assessments. But I would be interested to know, for instance, one part question of this is, what has been the average increase, if you had to put a estimate on, over the last 5 years? Does anybody know? I didn't come prepared for that, but it came up in my mind while I was thinking for this, but.
We're not prepared for it either.
I can provide at least
What, last year's? We can give you last year's.
well, this year.
Yes.
For 2025, our growth in assessments is 0.6%. And last year, it was 1.1%.
Okay. I'm just adding it up over 5 years is what I'm trying to do.
And you know, when we do a reassessment, depending on whether it goes up or down, we have to be very careful that we have to equalize our income, and that means that's why you can see sometimes our rates will go down, depending on what happens with the economy and how houses are assessed.
Right. I would say that hadn't happened much lately, though. Wouldn't you say that?
It was a few years ago it happened. In 22.
22? Yeah, that's
22,
right. That was a down year in the stock market, too.
Mr.
Go
I've
ahead.
got a question for you.
Sure. What? Oh, my last question was about that assessment. How does that play into your increased your revenue stream for that year with your increase in your proposed increase in the budget? How does that play into that process?
Well, again, our tax rates have to be, I think if it goes, there's a 1%, yeah.
If your total revenue from that assessment increases by more than 1%, we have to equalize the rate back down to keep it, I forget what the level is. The budgetary thing that goes along with that is we'll have discussions, we'll get presented that assessment October, November timeframe, so the letters can go out in December, January for notice of reassessment, what your new values are going to be. And that gets folded into our budget outlook when we get to that point in early to mid-March through the end of April.
So that revenue stream is a significant part of your budget process.
Yeah, that's our, yes.
Yeah, and usually during reassessments, when you look at how many people are assessed at higher value in terms of the tax rate, some people are valued less, some people are assessed more, and then some are balanced. So it goes up and down depending on the assessment issues during that particular year.
Right. I got to.
And we have a really great assessment team that we don't farm out that anymore. We made the decision years ago to do this in-house, and so we have our own assessment team so that we don't run into some of the issues that happened back in the 2000 time period where it was awful. People just complained bitterly about it because it was done by an organization that had no ties to the community.
Right, that's what I heard about it, and I was kind of interested in that, and now that I'm interested now in seeing how that process is playing out, and your opinion about it too, because you're putting your reputation on the line to say that. So
by having someone here locally, it helps, and we've had adjoining communities that have asked us about our service and whether they could combine it with us, and we haven't made that decision yet. Correct, Ms. Steele? No. No, we haven't.
That's how significant that is too, based on, I was here during that time.
Yeah.
And
was
boy,
it called Blue Ridge or whatever? It was, I remember it was really bad.
Actually, I won't get into any names or who, but I happen to know one of the guys came in to help you clean it up.
Oh, yeah. And then when we hired our own staff, it has worked out really well where when people have complaints, they can go right to the source internally, and those issues get resolved pretty quickly.
I want to say this for the public's welfare benefit here too. What Bob's saying is true. My neighbor went to the equalization board, right? or whatever. Yeah. And anyway, they adjusted something for his that was incorrect. I mean, they were right on spot to take care of things. So that's a good thing. All right.
Mr. Johnston was trying to recruit people for the fire department. You asked a question about utilities earlier. Tuesday night, we're going to have a public hearing about utilities, about the increase.
Which utilities, if you will?
Water and sewer.
Water and sewer.
So we're looking at an increase on that, and that's what we're going to talk about Tuesday.
Okay.
And so
And
we're
where's
also
that going to be again?
at the courthouse on Tuesday. No, it's here Tuesday night.
Here? Courthouse, I think.
Colonial Courthouse.
Okay.
I did say.
I would have showed up the wrong place, but it'll be at the courthouse Tuesday night.
Okay.
And, you know, what we're proposing is only the people on water and sewer and water pay the increases. And nothing coming from the general fund.
Now, what about people that may be coming onto the sewer, you know, and that, and
Well, they'll pay it
anticipating that?
then.
I would think they would want to be involved in that.
I would think so. So get everybody here. You're going to talk to people about other stuff, bring them.
Right, right. That is one question I have too about the business end. We talked about the young gentleman that talked about business. One question about that on the sewer end. That at one time it was, in fact, our development company I was working with, we looked at coming over here and we didn't come because of the relationship with the sewer coordination. And one of the problems were that when we had to go connect, if we built a pump station, whatever, we got no benefit from anybody else that came and hooked up to it. I suggest if you're not doing that, every jurisdiction we work with, almost everywhere else did. In other words, we put in the effort to put the pump station in and put a lot of money into it. We should get a benefit in the long run. The county too. Now, I'm not knocking that out, just the fact. When everybody comes and hooks up to it, just wanted you to know that's a good incentive for a developer to do something that will help the county build a pump station, but give them something back so that it gives them the incentive to do it. And anyway. Okay. Gentlemen, good night.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else, Ms. Jones?
Anybody besides me want to comment? I just have two very brief things to say. Number one is, did you or did you not say you had bought an AI system and you knew where everyone was in Walmart and Ollie's, et cetera, last meeting?
It wasn't even discussed last meeting, but
Well,
it's
of
not
whatever
what you
meeting you
just.
said it.
I don't even know how to rephrase what you said. There is a national system that uses tracking devices for all kinds of things, and I can't even say this right. Whether we buy the software or not, that program is working. We are not tracking people. The county can look and see how many people shopped at Walmart and what zip code did they come from, so we can analyze how much are we bringing in of shoppers from the Middle Peninsula area. When we look at tourism, we can look at the Daffodil Festival and look at all the zip codes that come. Every bit of the information is anonymous and not tied to anything. Yes, it uses cell phones. It's a national company. It's not, and we purchased a subscription that allows us to query things that help us with economic development, with the comp plan and things. So it can sound scary, but it's not exactly how you stated it.
Okay. Next point. The bridge is going to get rid of the toll. But have any of you ever driven through Florida? Okay, there's a toll every other 10 inches on their freeways, on their roads. So what's wrong with putting a couple of tolls through Gloucester? Even if it's a quarter?
We're not allowed to.
You're not allowed to? By
Right,
whom?
those roads in Florida that have all those tolls on it, they are private roads. You're paying to drive on a private road.
Oh, fascinating. Okay, and your tax reduction for seniors is dependent on their assets?
Assets and income.
Income, okay. Well, my income is poverty level. But I've had several relatives in the last 5 years die on me and leave me very expensive things. My car, which I had to have another car, where the other one was 340,000 miles and was falling apart, literally. My sister gave me part of her inheritance to buy my car. It's been paid for. It's not like I'm paying all this money for all these things. And I was told when I applied for it that they would come to my house and look at all of my stuff and evaluate how much I had.
Yeah, no one's going to come to your house. You have to fill out a form and present it to the Commissioner of Revenue.
Well, they want to know everything in your house.
No.
No,
No.
ma'am.
Well, they
wanna
did
know-
when I applied, that
They
was
want
years
to know
ago.
your address, and if you have a bank account, checking account, they need to know that you have one. I tried to get my mom signed up for it, but she owned a piece of property in a neighboring jurisdiction, which disqualified her from being able to seek that because it showed that she had ability to pay her taxes because she owned an additional property. So if you only own your home and your only income is Social Security, you're probably at a 95% chance that you'll qualify for that relief.
I'll try it again. But I'm not going to tell them, you know, every dresser drawer and.
And they don't
How
need,
many-
they will not ask you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Is there anyone else? No one else? That's it. And I thank y'all so much for coming. And
Yes, and as I said earlier, tonight's just one of the first nights of the budget season. We've already started, but please come out, talk to us, voice your opinions. We've got public comment, and thanks for coming.